Welcome to Season 6, Episode 39 of the Be Conscious podcast. Today, I am joined by someone very dear to me, my niece, Hannah Nicholas. Hannah joins us today from their home in the suburbs of London. As you likely know, in Season 6 of the Be Conscious podcast, we are continuing to discuss several human constructs. And today, I am so curious to have Hannah tell us about their experience unpacking the gender construct. Here we go.
Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast, the show that brings you enlightened perspectives on the frequency of money, life's many challenges, and those heavy feelings that may be holding you back from living your best life. And now your host, Dr. Susan Nicholas.
Hannah Nicholas is a 14-year-old African American and Japanese gender fluid and pansexual individual who attends a grammar school in London, UK. They attend a drama program outside of school and have lived in multiple U.S. states. Hannah's favorite subjects in school are English, drama, and art. Now today, I am excited to share this tender interview with you all. Together, Hannah and I will discuss the gender construct from the perspective of a Gen Z adolescent, because it is their generation that is redefining the gender construct for humanity. Hannah, welcome to the Be Conscious podcast.
Hi, hello.
You know, it is wonderful to have a young voice, a new voice, to help us to deconstruct something that many people, quite frankly, Hannah, in my generation, have not been able to um, unfurl, like unwind in our own brains because the generation that we came through and in the way that life was during that time, there were just certain things that didn't even exist. And so many of the, I would say, labels that we put on gender now, they were not words for us. And so we have challenges in understanding them. And I'm hoping this refreshing voice, like hearing from someone where this was just how the world that you were born into and how you feel. If you can help us just take some baby steps into this process of gender fluidity. And so maybe we can start out by you sharing with us what pronouns that you prefer to be used.
The pronouns that I prefer to use change day to day on how I feel, kind of on a spectrum, I guess.
Mhm.
I'll have masculine days and I'll have feminine days and I'll have the days that I'm kind of in the middle.
Mhm.
It just changes throughout. Today I'm feeling very neutral, very they them.
Okay. And w- do you have okay, I have a couple of questions surrounding that. I love this thought, this feeling of masculine days and feminine days because in talking with your parents and with you in the past, I understood that if you were going to put a he or she pronoun in for the day, you tended to prefer he. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's just something that happened, really.
Okay. Can you tell me what does a masculine day feel like and what does a feminine day feel like for you?
Well, a masculine day, I feel, is more a day where I kind of just the conventions, not really conventions, the idea of being a woman just isn't it doesn't feel like the right thing at the time.
Mhm.
But being neutral sometimes will feel too not abstract, but really I'm struggling here with words.
It's okay. Like an ambivalence, like it's not here nor there, it's just like maybe existing, like just being?
Yeah, really.
Okay.
Being feminine sometimes just doesn't appeal, and the neutrality of it is often difficult to explain to people, so I tend to avoid that
Mhm.
normally. So
I think you did a very good job. Go ahead.
it just depends how I feel on a masculine day. It's I don't want to be feminine or I want to be masculine. And that just, it's not really a feeling you can explain. It's like you become kind of attached to this idea for a certain amount of time that you want to be. So that's what you'll be.
Hmm. Can you tell me what it means to you to be masculine?
To be masculine, it really, to me, it's more how I present myself and how other people define me. I I live in a school environment and kids are often quite cruel, so they'll say exactly what they think. And I I find on masculine days, I present myself in a way that is more stereotypically masculine. I generally avoid doing things that were like way long time ago taught for women to do on masculine days. 'Cause then people will view me as more masculine.
Would a masculine day be a day more about, I don't know, doing than feeling, like sports or working with your hands or playing video games? I'm trying to like distill down in your experience. What do you do differently when you feel more masculine?
I don't really do much differently. I just feel differently. Cause being masculine doesn't change really who I am and what I like to do.
Does it ever change how you dress, for example?
Actually, yes, it does. I dress different because I want to be perceived correctly on how I feel on that day.
Okay. I mean, I've seen you in pictures with skirts on, and I've seen you in pictures with jeans on, and I think when I look at your clothes, I don't okay, when I see you, like, as your auntie and I see you, I feel like most of the times I see you in feminine clothes?
That is mostly because I don't care that much what I wear when I'm at home or when I don't have to talk to people, really, because I know that my family will understand how I feel that day, and because I'm with them, I don't really care. I also tend to buy feminine clothes more because they fit my body better.
Mhm. That makes sense.
The only real things I have are, like, jeans and some nice shirts that are from, like, men's sections at different clothing stores.
I gotcha. Can you tell me when this distinction this distinction of your feelings, which I think is very, very intuitive. And maybe this intuition, like this feeling of this, what you say is more a masculine energy or more feminine energy or neutral energy. Maybe we all have it, Hannah, but I wonder if the older generations, um, if we ever had the language to distinguish between how we were feeling. And I'm wondering for you, when in your life did this distinction occur for you? Like, you were born into the world, and even in clinical medicine, it is said that female brains, they're bathed in estrogen, like they have a like in utero, there's a almost a chemical process that creates the female mind, and similarly with the male, something, and there's, of course, this chemical kind of reaction. There is a spectrum of them. You have females that have more masculine tendencies and males that have more feminine tendencies, and we all have observed it. So what I'm wondering is, for someone to have this intuitive awareness of self, like self-awareness that is so incredibly deep and intricate, and you are now 14, like, when did this occur to you? Like, can you remember a time or a day or an event or anything that says, "Oh, yeah, today I'm not she, I'm they," or "I'm not she, I'm he."
There wasn't really a moment of clarity. It was kind of a period of ambiguity that led to, well, if I'm not this thing, then I have to be something else, right?
Mm,
But there's no real need to be something else. So it was just, it happened in maybe probably in the first lockdown in this country. So, like 2020, of course. And it just kind of,
so you would have been about 12 years old then?
yeah,
Okay.
I had a lot of time for self-reflection in that time.
Mhm.
And one day I was sitting, I finished my online work, and it just kind of didn't feel quite right, but I couldn't tell why, really. Because I had always been like very solid on on the concept of my gender. But so I didn't assume it was that.
Mm.
And of course I tried changing different things, and then I got to this thing. It was like a big block in my head, and it just kind of melted and squished when I tried to change it. Because
Mm.
you'd think that it would just, if I have a cube and I turn it, I'll see a different face. But
Mhm.
it can't really turn. It just rolls and you see where it comes out.
Mhm.
And at the time, the self-reflection that I did kind of led me to this conclusion, I guess.
And can you can you share with us what that conclusion was? Um, what what have you defined as your gender identity?
I have defined my gender identity as gender fluid, and it just changes on how I feel at the time. Because, well, I tried to turn it, but that doesn't feel right. It felt right at the time, but a different time it feels wrong. So I tried changing it and changing it and changing it, but nothing works. So the real thing that works was continuously changing it, right?
Mm. Is for like some time ago, your dad told me and you told me that you considered yourself non-binary, queer, yet there are several adjectives. Is is that gender fluid?
Non binary is a large umbrella. Non binary is a large umbrella for genders that don't fit within the boy or girl binary. Really? That's why it's called non binary.
I was just wondering if gender fluid was analogous or interchangeable with non-binary.
It is interchangeable, just gender fluid is more specific, really.
Okay. And did this self-reflection and this conclusion, did attraction have anything to do with it? Did you find when you were reflecting that as a girl, perhaps you weren't always attracted to boys, or you're attracted to boys and girls, or you weren't attracted to either? Like, was there something about attraction that motivated this introspection?
Honestly, not really. I never, like, paid attention to other people in the way that I would become attracted to them, so I wasn't bothered by any of that. It just felt different in a sense that didn't involve attraction at all.
Okay. Okay. As you've matured over the pandemic and over the past couple of years, would you say that attraction is playing a role in your choices now, or is it still where you were 2 years ago?
It's still in the same place, really, and I don't know how long that's gonna hold up, but it's really not a problem that I'm stuck on.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, not suggesting that it's a problem, but,
Yes, I understand that was a bad choice of words.
I just, at this time, most of us can relate, like most adults, I'm sure your parents can relate to this time in our life when we began to question our own identity. Even if we only think that it was the binary, I could be a boy or a girl, and everything else was quote unquote wrong or even deviant or evil. I mean, there was sadly, a time on the planet where expressing what you're expressing, like expressing feelings at this level where we're shamed and punished, even punishable by death in some cultures. That we were so, I would say, we adhered so closely to the construct, this gender construct, that anything outside of it was an aberrancy, or was, I would say, feared. And so why that is, I think we could spend a lot of time trying to decipher the minds and philosophies of our founding fathers from the past. Uh, but the constructs have been very rigid, and your generation in particular, I don't I don't even think it's those that quote unquote define themselves as gender fluid, but just this generation, um, your generation, Gen Z, uh, the Gen Alphas that have come just after you. I believe that they're redefining the construct, or they're breaking the paradigm. They're breaking down this idea of a rigid gender construct for all of us to examine. And many of us that are older and didn't know that we had a choice are actually now making different choices and recognizing our own inner feelings. As you said, doing that deep introspection and honoring what we feel. I mean, even when I think about myself, um, I feel like there's this duality playing out in me as far as the gender roles. Because, as you know, I am a mother, and I have, embraced the feminine construct. But the roles of it, some of them I've rejected, and some of them I've embraced. And, for instance, like I like to work and, create things and earn money and, do things that would be otherwise, or in the past would have been reserved for men. Even when I became a surgeon, it wasn't that many women that were in that field. It was very male dominated, and there are many women that are, breaking into these types of things, and I wonder if all of that is part of this spectrum that you're speaking of, but we just didn't have language for it. Sometimes I feel more mothering, and sometimes I'm feeling like more disciplinary and, like I need to go to work, and do stuff and make money and create value in the world, different types of value in the world outside of the home. So I think it exists in me too.
The spectrum truly makes sense because life is just shifting from a phase of, oh, I like this thing to another phase where, oh, I like this thing, or I want to do this and this and this, or you're doing different things. So feeling different ways and wanting to do different things makes sense. And it's kind of a curiosity of what the other gender would typically do that often fuels this.
Yes. And I think what you said about shifting, like all of life is all shifting. It's always moving. I say that there's nothing more consistent in life than change itself. Things you every moment to moment we are changing and shifting. And hopefully it's for the better, right? We get better as we go along and more aware and more in tuned with ourselves and more accepting, more loving. Um but this gender thing, I think because it has been it's a dogma. Meaning that things have been always been done a certain way, that when you shift a paradigm and you must change the way that you live, believe, speak, think, honor how you feel, then many feel uncomfortable with it because they don't know how to be untethered. So there's a quote that I'll share with you that is by actually it's from an English philosopher, Bertrand Russell, who said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken.
Mhm.
And I feel that in many ways, the gender roles were just like habits, like something that we fell into, were told that was right. And then when we have to break that habit, there is resistance. Like we don't know how to not be in the habit of it or in the practice of it, how to undo something that was instilled from when we were infants. And so when you talk about this fluidity, it is unless you break it early like you did, 12 years old, when you're not fully formed, um, then it's much easier to just be, just be yourself, just be whatever you feel that day, that moment, than it is for many of us who have been conditioned over the decades to follow a certain line, a certain role, a certain way, a certain ideology of living. Does that make sense to you?
It does. And it reminds me, my friend said that recently. Remember being a small child and going to like a park with your parent or with your friends and stuff. And there's a path there, but you always want to go off the path just to see what it's like. And
Mhm.
sometimes you'll go back because the grass is too tall and it makes your legs itch. But sometimes it's like nice, right?
Yes.
And that's really what it is. Eventually, if you never go off the path, you'll stop thinking about what it's like to try to leave it,
Mhm.
and it'll just you will no longer have the desire to try and look for the change or try it.
And I think sometimes, Hannah, when you've been on that beaten path your entire life, going off of the path creates, raises fear. People are afraid to, I would say, even know who they truly are. What their true capacity. And when I talk about capacity in this context, I mean their capacity to love. And yeah, I think it's a deep, deep conditioning to stay on that trodden path that keeps people in line and in their roles until they die, even if they hate it. Even if they feel like they're hiding or they never have full expression of themselves.
Mhm.
I was going to ask you two more questions.
Okay.
What would you say and I know you cannot speak for a generation, but what would you say is the new philosophy or ideology of gender? I mean, if we contrast that, yeah, from male and female, and women do this and boys do that and play with this and these colors, we have all these defined things for boys and girls, men and women. What would you say your philosophy is?
That is quite a hard question to place on a minor. My goodness. I I really just think that if you don't like it, just change it. And if you don't like any of the options that you have, make a new one, as long as you're happy.
Mm, I think that's a brilliant philosophy. And this might tie into the final question that I have for you.
Mhm.
What messages, what message or messages would you give to your peers, like the kids at school that might be cruel, and to, I would say, the older generation? What would you have to say to them?
If you stop judging people first, you might understand them, really.
Mm,
Don't put people on a different level to you before you've really met them.
I think that is sound advice. I always think that we have a certain, okay, judgment is something that we all have and we all exercise every day, every moment of the day. Often judgment helps us to distinguish between danger and just something that's fearful to us. Like if there's true and present danger, that's from a judgment that we make. Something that's, let's say, good for us versus not good for us, or something that's pleasing or not pleasing. Those are, we make judgments all the time. What's comfortable and what is not. So there's not anything inherently wrong with making a judgment. But I think the idea is when our first judgment is of of a person in particular who is different from us, then to examine the judgment, to say, because we've been, some would say, like in our elementary brain, like the one that we share with the crocodiles and the alligators, like this very amygdala, this very rudimentary part of the brain that makes these snap judgments, like fight or flight, fear, danger type of things. That is always going to be with us. That is a part of us. So how do we override that? And I think you made a very good point by, I always feel that if you get to know someone, if you speak with them, if you share something with them, whether it's an interest, whether it's a meal, whether it's a conversation, then that first judgment can be overridden. You can say, "Oh yeah, my first impression was XYZ, but as I got to know the person, as I got to connect with them as a on a human, like on a soul level, then I realized they're not so different than me, or everyone has redeemable qualities of some sort. That there's something that you can love about them. That they inherently embody love just like you do." And so I think that's part of it. I think for every instance, when we have that initial fear and rejection type of judgment, to investigate it, to go deeper into it. And like you said, introspect it, like have that process of looking at yourself, that self reflection, and saying, well, what is it that bothers you so much? And asking that question of yourself. And in doing that process, it allows you kind of to disarm yourself from all that posturing and defensive mechanisms that come when we are actually, fearing danger versus fearing an illusion, or fearing a thought or fearing a construct, something that we've just been taught that may not even be true.
Well, honestly, though, it's you only fear things really when you're taught to fear them or they have something that you do fear. But that is also something that you've been taught, really? I don't know how to explain it. All fears
Mhm.
are taught either by experience or by other people.
That's true.
So, if you just like before you believe what someone's saying, just like think about it for just a second longer, and sometimes you can realize how genuinely ridiculous some of it is.
Mhm.
It's fear is a difficult thing to gauge because it's completely subjective and it changes from person to person.
Mhm. Yeah, and from moment to moment. I think some of the greatest things that we fear are ourselves. Like I said earlier about this whole gender fluidity, some of us will not veer off the path because we don't want to know that this exists in us, or we don't want to acknowledge it. That we all have it. We all have masculine, feminine hormones and masculine and feminine behaviors and desires and whatnot. Ways of being. We all do. It's inherent to our humanness, but many of us are too afraid to explore it. Maybe it's fear of ridicule. Maybe it's fear of breaking the facade, breaking down the false exterior and showing the true self and being just like fully expressive as yourself. I think the rudimentary fear mechanism that we have that keeps us from danger is necessary. Like someone would say it's healthy fear. Like to me, it's like knowing your smallness when you're at the edge of the ocean, like the colossal power of the ocean.
Mm,
And so there's like a healthy fear where I will say to myself, I'm going to respect this awesome power. This can swallow me up whole in an instant. And then there's the fear that stops me from learning how to swim or to get in the water in the first place. So I think we all have it. We all have a natural fear mechanism that when used, I think appropriately, can actually preserve us. Allow us to live longer on the planet. And then there are other fears that I think are imagined, like fear of our own gender fluidity, for example.
mm. It's most all fear is just all fear and all feelings are just in your head. It's just kind of a judgment of whether it's of the right caliber, really, for what you're experiencing.
Mhm.
And that judgment is very hard to make in the moment. And often people will make the wrong judgment. Often I'll make the wrong judgment because it just happens.
Mhm.
There's irrational fears of things. That's why people get diagnosed with different phobias, right?
Right, right.
It's just, it's not really something that's controlled, it just happens. It's a spur of the moment reaction to something. And it occurs in very simple things and very elaborate things, things that are natural and unnatural. And it can quite easily take over, the same as the ocean can take a person.
Mhm. Yes, you're exactly right. Well, Hannah, this has been a most special and impactful interview. I want to thank you so much for being here with us on the Be Conscious podcast.
Of course.
Thank you again, Hannah, for being with us, and you're welcome back anytime. I love you.
I love you too.
I want to thank you for taking this inner journey with us today. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious. If you loved this episode and if today's message resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Be Conscious podcast. I want to know what inspired you and what conscious topics you would like to hear more about. And if you want, you can share those thoughts and questions with me at info@susannicholas.org.
Thanks for listening to the Be Conscious podcast with author, TEDx international speaker, and conscious coach, Dr. Susan Nicholas. Be sure to connect with her to stay up to date with her latest news and works. Learn more about her conscious speaking platform at susannicholas.org/speaking. Stay tuned for the next thought-provoking episode. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious.